We're going to ask before we get going that if all participants could please make sure that in their video on Zoom that it shows their real name and their affiliation to the college, for example, faculty, student, alum, community member. If you do not know how to change that, if you hover in your picture in the top right, you can see a blue square with 3 little dots. If you click on that and then pull down to rename, you can change it to your name as well as your affiliation and anything else you would like to add. Thank you.
Another couple of details. We have a really big group. We have 186 people here now, and we're likely to have some more. So we thought that having the chat be openly accessible might be difficult and detract from the experience. So we've locked down the chat, except that if you have a question or a need, you can chat to me. And as soon as I see it and can help you, I will try to do that. Also, once this gets going, and actually now too, we're trying to keep people muted to avoid the, passing traffic and, phones going on off and all that kind of thing. But when we get to the sections where we're going to have questions, we'll go ahead and then unmute and allow people to communicate with us. But in order to have this thing, which is pretty big, run smoothly, that's the approach that we're taking. And we've had some questions about whether it's being recorded. We are recording it. We've had some requests from people who couldn't participate. So it's being recorded via cloud, and we'll figure out how to make that available to people afterwards.
Thank you. Christian, can you advance the slide? So hello again, everyone. My name is Maria Bobroff. I teach French in the Department of Modern Languages, and I have been teaching at Guilford since 2004.
And my name is Gail Webster. I'm a professor of chemistry. I've been teaching at Guilford since 2003. I serve as co-president of Guilford College's AAUP chapter along with Lisa McLeod. It's important to note that all of the panelists and the moderators represent Guilford College's AAUP chapter. We're speaking for the chapter and we're speaking for ourselves. We're not representing the college in any way.
Christian, could we all have a moment of silence, please? Thank you. Dave, Gail is muted.
Sorry, I was trying to make sure I was really muted during the silence and being really silent. A teach-in is a way to disseminate information and to generate discussion about a topic that's of pressing interest to the public. The goal is to provide a space for a focus on facts and to hold a discussion that will help us move toward a socially just outcome.
So the goals of this teach-in are threefold. One, we want to help participants understand the fundamental aspects of higher education and how it works. We want to provide background so that participants can formulate their own questions. And we want to offer important vocabulary that we can all share as we move forward.
Our agenda for this session will include the 5 panels that you see listed, with time for questions after the last panel, and then some concluding remarks.
Each panel will include 1 to 2 speakers, and it will last approximately 10 minutes. If there is time, we will take 1 or perhaps 2 clarifying questions. Otherwise, we ask that you hold other questions until the end of the teach-in.
We'll now move to our first panel, What is Financial Exigency, with panelists Lisa McLeod, Professor of Philosophy, and Jill Peterfesso, Associate Professor of Religious Studies.
Hi, I'm Lisa McLeod. Thanks everybody for coming. I see a bunch of my former students who I haven't seen in a long time, a bunch of former colleagues. It's really great to see everybody. And we kind of want to let you know up front that we're not going to be solving any problems here in this hour and a half discussion. We can't solve all of Guilford's problems or anybody's personal problems during this session, but we do hope that we can create a space where people get some maybe richer understanding of what's going on at Guilford. So first of all, Guilford has not declared financial exigency. Let me make that clear. That sounds bad, doesn't it? Financial exigency. I put the definition of, the AAUP's definition of financial exigency on this slide. So I think it's fair to say that Guilford College is in a budgetary crisis. It is usually in a budgetary crisis, but this year it seems to be in a worse crisis than usual. And I say seems to be because I don't have all the information, and that's one of the problems that we're going to be talking about a little bit. Let me just tell you, the AAUP is the American Association of University Professors. We have had a chapter or an organization at Guilford since maybe 2007. Richie Zwagenhoff, who's an emeritus professor of psych and one of your panelists, really helped kind of rebirth the AAUP at Guilford. And in this year of COVID and budgetary crisis, we've seen a large growth in our membership. So that's been really great. It gives us a place for faculty to have solidarity with each other, also think about the best interests of the college and our staff colleagues. So the AAUP is this national organization. It exists primarily to protect academic freedom, freedom of speech, and to help support tenure protections for faculty. So a lot of people have heard of tenure. What tenure means is not a guarantee of employment, but it means that a faculty member, once they've achieved tenure, usually after 6 years in the US, once they've achieved tenure, they can only be fired for cause, which means they do something really terrible and everyone agrees that they should be removed from their job. So that's the main reason why a faculty member with tenure can be removed from their job. But there are also these two other reasons, right? What if the college is having a real change of identity and there are too many people teaching Greek and Latin and not enough people teaching Spanish and French, or other kinds of changes like that? If a college faculty decides it wants to change its whole curriculum, then occasionally there'll be a reason for terminating a faculty appointment, like say if I was a teacher of Latin. However, they might be able to find room for me to do something else at the college, and the college handbook usually requires them to do that. The other time when a college is able to let go of tenured faculty without cause is if the college is in an extreme financial crisis. However, it would require that the Board of Trustees does announce it's in this thing called financial exigency. Jill's going to tell you more about what that all means, but in addition to the definition we have on the slide, at Guilford College in particular, what the handbook says is that if the college declares financial exigency, then a whole bunch of faculty and staff who will come together around the budgetary information and try to figure out what's the best way we can come out of this crisis together. So it's this sort of all hands on deck emergency. And I think there's a sort of Quakerliness to this notion that if the community is in crisis, then the community should get all of the information it can to think about ways to solve that crisis. Faculty, staff, students, alums, everybody. It is not clear to anybody exactly how bad the financial situation at Guilford is, but it's very bad. And the process that the college leadership has chosen to solve this problem is a sort of hybrid process, but it doesn't allow us access to all the information we would like to have as faculty and staff and students, as if we were to declare financial exigency. So I'm going to turn that over to Jill, and she will tell you more about financial exigency. Can we advance the slide and get Jill?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Christian. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Peter-Fesso from Religious Studies. Thank you, Lisa. So as I've been telling my students who I encourage to attend this teach-in, what I'm really hoping for is that this gives you good information so that you can ask good questions and take action if you decide that's necessary. Anything I say now is coming from a lot of online reading and research, and I'm happy to provide follow-up articles or citations if you would like them. So to build on the foundation that Lisa's laid, I wanted to try to anticipate some of the questions you might have about financial exigency. And the first one is this: is financial exigency good or bad? Well, it depends. It's complicated and it depends who you ask. AAUP will say financial exigency provides a necessary safeguard to protect tenured faculty. And AAUP further says that a college cannot eliminate programs and departments as a way of eliminating faculty. And a declaration of financial exigency is required to start any prioritizing or right sizing of a college. Now, some administrators and some higher ed consultants take a different view. They will say that financial exigency is a problem because it demands a slow and deliberative process. And in dire financial times, cuts have to be made quickly. Also, a declaration of financial exigency might, quote, concern incoming students or returning students or alumni about the viability of the enterprise, end quote. In other words, financial exigency looks bad and can scare off future revenue streams like students and alums. So as we think about this question of good versus bad, I wanted to just throw out this example of a college in Seattle called Cornish College of the Arts that just this month declared exigency because of pandemic-related losses in enrollment. And Cornish's president has stated that exigency is necessary to create a plan and that there is no discussion of closing our doors. So this small school in an urban setting, using financial exigency with what seems to be integrity, might be one for us to watch. So the second question I anticipate is this: what does financial exigency have to do with small liberal arts colleges specifically? Now, many supporters of the liberal arts are saying that administrators' use of program prioritization without financial exigency is, quote, essentially a death sentence for the liberal arts, end quote. Observing issues like these, a scholar of cultural pedagogy, Henry Giroux, has said, quote, the dystopian mission of higher education has become to be about producing robots, technocrats, and compliant workers, end quote. Also concerning about this is what tends to get harmed in these prioritizations tend to be social justice oriented disciplines and faculty. By declaring exigency, schools turn the process of cutting over to faculty educators to make these decisions about academic programs. It keeps all the faculty voices in play. Without exigency and the processes that it initiates, administrators then believe they can make the decisions and remove the academic program from faculty purview. This undermines academic equality. It also creates a very stratified institution where some programs and people are told by administrators that they are better and more valuable than others. And this is antithetical to the well-rounded multidisciplinary education that the liberal arts promises. So in sum, financial exigency is a checks and balances system that is meant to protect the liberal arts, tenured faculty, and ensure shared governance, which you're going to hear more about soon. So I'm going to leave you with 3 questions that you might want to think about. So first, if a school is in dire enough financial straits, why would it not admit these problems publicly, declare financial exigency, and begin a process of healing? 2, when it comes to making dramatic cuts at your college, even if they're necessary for financial reasons, who do you want making the decisions about these cuts? Administrators and trustees, or faculty and student representatives and staff? Now 3, a final thought and question. As I think about all of this, I want to leave you with something that I often think about, and it builds really nicely on the Henry Giroux quote I used before. So really it comes down to this for me. Do you want your college to have as its mission the creation of workers or the creation of fully realized persons? In other words, do you want your education to be about becoming a worker, a person defined by what you do to earn a living? Or do you want your education to be about becoming a fully realized human, a person who participates in society, who votes and volunteers, who creates and imagines, who has relationships, and who also has careers or a collection of jobs? I know how I answer that as a professor and as a person. I know I'm committed to helping students become fully realized humans and all the messiness that that entails. And for that, I know we need the liberal arts. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. For our next panel, or rather our next panel, oh, Christian, could you advance to, yes, thank you. Our next panel will address shared governance. Richie Zwigenhoft is Dana Professor of Psychology Emeritus. He taught at the college for 45 years and revived this chapter of AAUP in 2007. He served on the NC AAUP Executive Committee and on the Executive Committee of the North Carolina AAUP Foundation. Zhihong Chen is Associate Professor of History, and she has taught at Guilford since 2008.
Okay, we're ready for me now. Thanks, Maria. Allow me to provide a little bit of history. I promise it won't be too extensive. As has been noted, this event is sponsored by the Guilford chapter of the American Association of University Professors, the AAUP. We are one of 500 local campus chapters. Each of these 500 chapters faces specific local issues, but all of them face some of the same issues. And one of these overarching issues is shared governance. The AAUP was founded more than 100 years ago in 1915, when faculty members at some colleges and universities sought to include their voices in the directions that their schools were taking. They feared that the boards of trustees at their schools, which were dominated by businessmen, would make business decisions that were not necessarily in the best interests of higher education. And as has been noted, they worried that those who were running the schools might at times seek to get rid of any faculty members who espoused unpopular views. That is, they were worried about academic freedom. At its inception, the organization emphasized, therefore, 2 things: tenure, which has already been discussed, and shared governance, which emphasized faculty involvement, not only in educational policies, but also in the many other decisions that affected the schools. The AAUP first composed a formal statement on shared governance 5 years later in 1920, 100 years ago. And they then revised it over time. They have a 1966 statement that has been endorsed by many colleges and universities, but there have been subsequent statements as well. These policy statements address such matters as salaries for faculty and administrators, financial exigency, the selection, evaluation, and retention of administrators, the role, the costs, and the oversight of college athletics, and the faculty status of librarians. Okay, so that's some general history. Let me turn to Guilford. What might I say about Guilford? I want to make three brief, personal, subjective observations. First, over time, and especially in the last few decades, faculty at Guilford have lost ground when it has come to shared governance. This can be seen in many areas, but especially in matters related to the budget, in decisions related to the physical plant, and in decisions related to the salaries and at times the bonuses given to senior administrators. Let me give a personal example. A few weeks ago, I spoke by phone with John Stoneburner, who taught religious studies at Guilford for many years, and who I think I saw him among the visitors to our event today. John reminded me that in the 1980s, there was this intense faculty meeting or faculty forum about whether or not the college should borrow millions of dollars for a building project. He did not remember which project it was. He did remember, however, that I had spoken strongly against taking on this debt. I have no memory of this. I have no recollection of that position that I took or the faculty meeting. I have no idea if I was right or wrong. The terms of the loan might have been a good one. The reasons for borrowing that money might have been justified. But what strikes me now is that we had that discussion openly, heatedly, and that faculty voices were heard. Sorry about that. I didn't mute my phone. That we had that discussion, that faculty voices were heard on the matter of taking on financial debt. And my guess is the board listened to us, though clearly it was the board's decision, not ours. Okay, that's first. Second, this loss of influence has not just been the result of power-hungry administrators, but in some cases and during some periods, fewer faculty were willing or able to allocate the time that's required for faculty governance. The teaching and committee load could be daunting for faculty at Guilford. And if faculty want to maintain academic careers, there are costs to taking on what can be time-consuming commitments involved with shared governance. Ask any clerk. Still, even if some overworked faculty, or maybe some who are not overworked, have at times left things to the administration that once were faculty driven, it's my observation that in recent years, administrations have restructured themselves, their leadership teams, their cabinets, and at times they have changed what were once faculty committees into college-wide committees guided by administrators. And these changes have very much reduced the faculty voice in shared governance. Third, and finally, Guilford, like many other colleges and universities, has in many ways adopted a corporate mentality, one that sees students as consumers and one that treats faculty, especially contingent faculty, as workers. We have become a college that has leaders who have concluded that it is necessary at times to immediately escort those who lose their jobs off of the campus, even some members of our community who have been members of our community for a long time, and to require that they sign non-disclosure agreements in order to receive severance packages. Those AAUP founders back in 1915 worried that colleges and universities would take on a corporate rather than an educational mentality. We're worried about something important. I fear that in trying to stay afloat in challenging economic times, we have very much moved in this direction. I could go on, but our time is limited. I want to leave time for discussion. It is possible that even with more faculty involvement, the college might have taken what I consider from afar and now from retirement to be a huge gamble when it chose to borrow the amount of money it borrowed and agreed to mortgage our assets the way it did. Ultimately, these decisions made by the board. And so the question I think we face is how to encourage the board to allow for more shared governance and to create or recreate a college that fully engages the faculty in shared governance. Thanks.
Okay, my name is Zhihong Chen, Associate Professor of History. And my career at Guilford is much shorter than Richie's. I came 2008, so, and Richie has given a very good history of AAUP and its history at Guilford. Since I'm also a historian, I would also like to go back to history to look at one or two examples that I think really embody the spirit of shared governance. Since we are a Quaker heritage school, so I really think that shared governance is a tradition that's rooted in the college's ethos. And I can say that it's a part of the college's DNA. So many of you are perhaps familiar with the story, right? In the 17th century, before Guilford was even established, when George Fox and other early friends abolished the clergy in the church and insisted that everyone can have a direct personal relationship with God without involving a priest or minister. They were affirming shared governance in the pursuit of truth. By overthrowing the established religious institution and hierarchy and restoring the right of knowing to each human being, they set an early example of strong shared governance. For many years, the belief that light is within everybody and each human being is of unique worth shaped Guilford's identity. We aspired to be an inclusive community that is attentive to everybody's voice, no matter how small it is. We trained our ears through moments of silence to listen to the quiet, to seek wisdom and light in diverse human voices, because we value them not based on market value, but on shared common humanity. We opened our door to slaves, to students of color, to refugees, and to the poor. We promoted shared governance through developing new courses and new programs to respond to students' needs and to promote equality and social justice. When I interviewed for my current job 12 years ago, what really impressed me was not any of the buildings, dorms, or any of the sceneries, but the people and the care and the warmth that was demonstrated to me during my interview. As you all know, that Guilford faculty are poorly paid and terribly overworked. So despite all of that, I stayed, my whole family stayed here and helping me in my job at the Guilford. So what really kept me here is really the care and the warmth that we as a community have indicated to each other. Certainly, we are in a very deep crisis, and this is not the very first crisis that the college is going through. To me, shared governance is the right to know what's happening at the college. as stakeholders, especially students who are paying to get education here, as faculty, as staff who have devoted our whole life and whole career to this college, and we really should have a say in the decision-making process. To me, shared governance is not subject ourselves to the tyranny of capitalist market ideology, but value each other based on the shared humanity. And shared governance is to take care of each other, uplift each other, nourish each other's spirits and souls. And in time of crisis, trying to keep everybody on the boat instead of dividing our community and kicking some people out of the boat. I hope that whatever we are going to do in the next days, we can survive this crisis without losing our soul. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our third panel will address Quaker values and shared governance in difficult times. We welcome Wes Daniels, William R. Rogers, Director of Friends Center and Quaker Studies.
Thank you, friends. Jihang, thank you for that great lead-in. I must confess that when talking about the Quaker tradition in any meaningful way, given the challenges that we face as a college, I feel pretty inadequate. The context of what the Poor People's Campaign calls the 5 interlocking evils of rampant poverty due to late-stage capitalism, systemic racism, climate devastation, the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of Christian nationalism in this country are the real problems we face. I believe that in many ways, what we're seeing at Guilford are the side effects and the symptoms of these larger injustices. If we want to add to this the utter failure or falling apart, collapse of higher ed culture in this time, it feels like any talk of Quaker values is a little like bringing a hammer and a hand drill when everyone else is using power tools. Secondly, what we have called the core values or Quaker values is problematic on a number of levels, not least of which because, as we all know, they are so easily co-opted by one side and weaponized by another. I'm acutely aware of the recent union struggle at Brooklyn Friends School, where the administration claimed that they needed to decertify the union because of Quaker values. On the other hand, it's easy to want to weaponize values language for the good of those in the struggle. Instead, the values, what Quakers call testimony, are a part of a larger ecosystem of practice, tradition, community, worship, and story. Those values, when kept in that ecosystem, are very powerful, but when pulled out, have very little on their own to stand up to and resist the 5 interlocking evils of empire. In order to do that, we need a far more potent concoction of practice, analysis, and collective action if we are to resist. There is a part to play for the Quaker tradition, all of this, but its insight seems to me to be more an alternative vision than a quick fix. We see this alternative when we hold the Quaker tradition up to the many messages, both implicit and explicit, we have witnessed as the college community and what the Quaker tradition has to say about it. When we continue to hear a message that we're not good enough individually or corporately, and that if we could only be something different from who we are, the Quaker tradition teaches that we already have all we need to do exactly what we're called to do. In religious language, I would say God is still present and active among us. We might also say that the spirit of Guilford is alive, and it is our job to heed that spirit, who can help us live into this community and what it was created to be, rather than to force it to become something or someone else. It is trusting that the gift we have is good enough. When the message we continue to hear is that the bottom line is all that matters, we know that the Quaker tradition points us to something much bigger, broader, and deeper, the testimony of community, which says that people always come first. Guilford as a business, if it seeks to remain connected to its Quaker roots, must always operate within the context of community. A healthy community does not operate as a business as usual, but seeks to love the human and more than human resources in its care, as the motion of love that friends seek to bear witness to. A message we're told is that the truth is somewhere out there, and only if we get the right experts, pay the right price for consultants, then we can finally have the answer. However, the Quaker tradition teaches that the truth is within the community, and that communal discernment, shared governance, and deep listening are some of the most important technologies or tools we have to get us through these difficult times. Another message we're told is that money and power matters, and that those at the top will always be reluctant to sacrifice whatever piece they hold on to. But as Jesus taught, you cannot serve both God and mammon. This is why the Quaker tradition stands in a long line of spiritual traditions of resistance, teaching us that God is found in and among the powerless, those at the margins, those who are the disinherited, and those who, Howard Thurman says, have their backs against the wall. These are the ones whose voices we should be amplifying and allowing us to lead in this moment. When we see that business as usual got us into this mess, and we're told that business as usual will get us out of it, we know that the Quaker tradition calls us to the testimony of truth-telling. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. We are called to speak the truth plainly, clearly, and make sure that our words and our actions line up, that we can stand to account for what we have done and said. We need truth-telling alongside community. You cannot have one without the other. Both rely on trust and authentic relationships as the ligaments that hold us together. And lastly, when the message is one of division, rivalry, and suspicion over and against one another, we are reminded of the very deep wisdom and the theological commitment that there is that of God in all people, that all life is to be dignified and lifted up, and that because so friends have sought to participate in what the Bible calls the multitude, and what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community. We are to reject the politics of division and instead build strong and broad coalitions so that we can speak, act, and move as a collective. The Quaker tradition is an old set of tools to bring to these issues. It may not be everyone's taste, and it may not be enough on its own to help. But if it can help, then these are the threads that we must pull on. We must see the abundance of what is already in front of us. We must care and commit to one another as a community. We must practice corporate discernment and deep listening to many voices. We must stand in the traditions of resistance to empire. We must practice truth-telling and truth listening as we build up a beloved community. I want to leave you with this quote from civil rights leader Vincent Harding, who once said in an interview with the American Friends Service Committee, "You know something about building a Quaker community. You can see it. The vision you have is not meant to be kept to yourself. It's meant to be expressed, to trouble some people, to push some people, to embrace some people, but for you to keep saying, I see a Quaker community that does not yet exist, and I am absolutely committed to its coming into being. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Wes. We'll go ahead and move to our fourth panel, which will be led by Dave Dobson, Professor of Geology, who also teaches in Environmental Studies and CTIS. He has been at Guilford since 1997, and he will speak to us about budget challenges and strategies.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I made my own slides here, so I'm going to go ahead and share those. And then we'll get you back to the other thing. I'm not going to be equipped for the soaring eloquence of my peers on this panel, but one thing I do have is graphs. So hopefully you'll be able to enjoy some of those. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been facing from a financial perspective and how that fits into kind of national trends, and then some things that Guilford's been facing by itself. Let's start with some of the national things that are affecting us. It's probably a surprise to nobody that the cost of higher education has gone up a great deal over the last 20 years. And it's been increasing at far faster than the cost of, than inflation. And so that's something that the news media comment on all the time. And it's something that Guilford has followed, a trend that Guilford has followed in the same way that it's happened everywhere else nearly. And that's something that should, in the absence of any other factors, give colleges more money to work with. If they're charging their students more money, they should have more money. However, for some colleges, particularly those that cater to wealthy students and don't give out much financial aid, that's definitely true. For those for the other schools that are around like Guilford, who have a much more economically diverse student body, often there's no way for students and families to keep up with that increase in tuition costs. And so they have resorted to higher and higher financial aid awards, which tends to cancel out any net benefit from those increased tuition costs. And that's definitely where Guilford has been. We are not making significantly more revenue per student now due to a higher provision of financial aid than we were before. We may be increasing the spread a little bit between our students with most resources and our students with least, but we are not making more money overall. And that's been true of many other small liberal arts colleges. Another thing that's going on nationally is we are about 19 years after the 9/11 attacks and the economic collapse that was associated with that. That also was associated with a lot fewer children being born. And I think there are probably sociologists who could tell us why that is. But if you look at the country, especially the country, parts of the country around Guilford in the southeast and the east, where we get most of our students from, we are in the middle of what's going to be an extended period where there are a lot fewer students available. And so that's another thing that Guilford is dealing with as we try to recruit classes of students, is that there are just fewer students around and they all have many options. And so making the argument that Guilford is for them is more challenging and requires more discounting sometimes to get them to come. Another thing that's going on in higher ed that's relevant to Guilford is that there has been, in almost all areas, an increase in both the number and the compensation of administrators in colleges. That is one thing that's going on in many institutions. And you can see the light green line that for private institutions, presidents are kind of an indicator of this, but they've been growing faster than compensation of other employees. And that's also something that's happened at Guilford. At Guilford, the orange line at the bottom would be much flatter than others because we have lots of long-term employees and we go through cycles of not having enough money. And so we've had frozen salaries. But we replace our administrators at a much more rapid rate than we do our long-term staff and faculty employees. And so we have added costs at the top of our salary distribution, just as many other colleges have done. So let's look at some of the things that are happening at Guilford and how they have played into this as well. Guilford's enrollment has been through a little bit of a roller coaster over the last 20 years. In the 2000s, in the midst of several economic problems and with strong support from state government, we were able to grow our adult student population to a very significant degree, such that it rivaled in numbers our traditional student population. And so at the height of that time, we ended up with almost equal numbers of traditional age students, 18 to 22-year-olds, and adult students who were either completing degrees or starting new degrees entirely as adults. That boom ended for socioeconomic factors as the economy recovered, but also because the state support ended. And since that time, we've seen a steady decline in our enrollments, which has been fairly pronounced. You can see that kind of at the end of the big boom, we're at about 2,200. And now at the end of this graph in 2018, we're down around 1,500. We're lower than that now. Most of those losses have been in the adult student program, but some of them have also been in traditional age students. And so this shows the right half of that earlier graph. And you can see the fairly steep decline we've been on even over the last 6 or 7 years. I've included faculty numbers here too. These are all publicly available information that anybody could go look up. So this is nothing proprietary. But our faculty numbers have declined pretty much at the same rate as our students. And staff numbers are harder to get at, but staff numbers have declined some as well, particularly this spring when a number of our staff friends and colleagues were furloughed and laid off. So, so the whole college has responded to our decrease in enrollment by downsizing already. And we have matched our numbers to those. In terms of, this is another way of looking at that. This is our staffing from 2012 are the faded columns, and the staffing from this past fall is in the solid columns. And you can see that our loss of people, at least on the academic side, has been fairly spotty and not terribly strategic, because we've relied mostly on people retiring or leaving or dying and then not being replaced by new folks. Some of it has been strategic with the hiring of visiting faculty in various programs, but some of our programs are hurting more than others. And so that's also a problem that we're dealing with. Another issue that we have is that our retention rate is a little lower than our peers, or maybe a lot lower depending on your perspective. And a lot of that is focused in the transition from the first to second year. We've had a lot of trouble with our first year students not persisting to the second year. They either drop out or transfer. And so that's been a thing that we've been working on really hard for most of the last 20 years. It's nearly always an institutional priority. And in the last couple of years, we've taken a lot of steps with regard to setting up advising teams and additional staffing and kind of checking on people. And we've changed some policies to try to help that continue. But that's something that we've also struggled with. I think to some extent you could point to what we're doing as part of that issue, but also it may be the preparation level or the expectations of the students that we've recruited don't match necessarily what they see when they get here. And so that's a tough question, but that's something we've been dealing with for a long time. In terms of money, this is the heart of our current issue, and it's really been a long-term issue as well. We are very tuition dependent. We have an endowment, but it provides revenue that's only about 5% of our total budget each year. And so we have had our budgets shrink here. You can see the expenses in blue. The revenue in red bounces around a little more because it includes investment returns, which come from the market. But you can see declines there. I've added another couple of years of data on the end that aren't publicly available from iPads just to show the continuing trend line there. So we've had less money to work with, and we have cut our costs as we go. The problem with that is that some of our costs aren't able to be shrunk as our number of students shrink. We're obviously able to reduce staffing in some areas, such as instruction, and then in some other parts of the college as our budgets shrink and our enrollment shrinks. But we still have the same amount of grass to cut. We still have the same amount of buildings to heat and cool and clean. But we don't, and most importantly, we can't reduce the interest that we're paying on the debt that we've incurred. And so those are all fixed expenses that are going to be there no matter what size we are and how successful we are recruiting students. And so that's tricky. And that's something that we're struggling with, and it's part of what's led to our problems here. Here's another look at finances. You can see that the blue line is our endowment. That's been growing well. The red line is our total liabilities. That was shrinking up until 2016. Both of those trends are good. You want more endowment, you want fewer liabilities. In 2016, the administration at that point and the board saw an opportunity, because some of our bonds were finishing up and coming due, that we could refinance some of them, borrow some more money, and invest it in things that we had not been able to afford previously, such as renovations, and then a new initiative to recruit students, which was called the EDGE. And so that is something that we started spending a fair amount of money on. And so you can see our liabilities tick up there. What most of us who work here didn't know was that a lot of those projects were very expensive. And so the IPEDS data ended about 2018, but this spring we had a report that our total debt was closer to 80 million, which brings it up almost in line with our endowment at this point. And in fact, the most recent endowment estimates are right around there. So that's a big thing that's happened in the last few years, is that we have increased our debt by more than a factor of 2. And that's part of what is causing this financial crisis that we're dealing with. A lot of it, the rest of it is the ongoing trends. That meant that in spring, we started to see things become pretty difficult. We've added some expenses with new hiring, both in the programs related to the EDGE, this new recruiting initiative, and then also in other parts of the college. We had some expenses that we had been funding through our borrowing hit the main budget and become permanent costs. And then we have all of this new debt that we need to pay interest on. So we have those expenses added to what was already a fairly tight budget. Instead of seeing a big increase in enrollment, we saw a modest increase last year and then a drop this year as COVID came through. So we were not able to increase enrollments enough to cover those new costs that we had added. And in fact, to my observation, I don't have all the numbers, but it would have taken about 300 or 400 more students to actually cover all of those costs. So that was not a realistic expectation on behalf of those who were building the budgets that way. As a result, then we were in some trouble last year as this all started to come together. And then we hit the pandemic issue. And at the point where campus closed and students were sent home to learn remotely, we had to refund their housing and their board payments, because it's not fair to charge people for rooms and food if they're not using them. Many of those came in the form of refunds. Some of it came in the form of payments that were not then made. And that caused our budget to fall apart because we were counting on that revenue. Room and board is a big part of college revenue everywhere, not just at Guilford. And so that led to a bunch of actions which fell most heavily on our staff colleagues. That included furloughs of over 100 employees that lasted for many months, where they were getting health benefits but no salary, which obviously was very hard for them. And then we cut about 80 positions in the middle of summer, including 50 that were filled. So those are people who lost their jobs. That helped bring this year's budget back into line. We also, the college elected temporarily to cut retirement contributions for all employees, which saved us another $1 million or so, but is not how you want an institution to function long-term. Eventually, some of the losses from room and board were made up for by government assistance, including the PPP program, but it wasn't, we didn't have that money initially, and it wasn't clear that it would be forthcoming or that we would not have to pay it back, which would have been hard for us to do. So even without the pandemic, we have a significant structural budget problem unless we get those extra 300 or 400 students somehow. And we also are fairly maxed out in terms of our ability to borrow. So that's very difficult. Whatever the pandemic is doing to us is on top of those challenges. The thing that the board is discussing doing now is trying to balance the budget by cutting a significant number of positions. That is on top of those primarily staff colleagues who've been furloughed or lost their jobs over the summer. So that's adding on to a bunch of harm people have already suffered through. primarily staff members. As we've heard, cutting faculty members is challenging based on the commitments that the college has made to them in the form of tenure and contractual obligations. So that is where we are, and that is how all of this has come to the front. It's causing a great deal of distress and consternation among the community who works here, presumably also among the leadership, but the impact is likely to fall most heavily on those who work here. There are other things we could be doing. Obviously, recruiting more students and raising money would help add revenue to our programs. There are also things that we could do that would be new that might make us some money. People are thinking about those kinds of things. And then we've also advocated for maybe doing an early trial program to cut some of our costs voluntarily, as opposed to just laying people off. We also suggested that we might see if there are people who could afford to take a year off, both in terms of their duties, and see if we could save some money that way. And then many institutions are doing temporary salary reductions or partial furloughs where somebody might work 4 days a week instead of 5 and be paid a little less. That's very common. It's usually progressive, meaning that the leadership takes bigger cuts and then the folks making not as much money either are not cut or take less in the way of cuts. So there are other things we could be doing, but we haven't been pursuing those. The fixation or the focus has been on this prioritization and employee cuts. And so that's where we are. So I hope that gives people a little bit of a sense of where we're at and why we're calling this meeting and the kind of stresses that the community has been under as we walk through this year. All right, so I'll give it back to Christian if you want to share the slides again. You still got those? Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Our fifth and final panel is going to be led by two current students. Trey Kawaguli is a religious studies major, class of 2021, and Cade Wooden is a community and justice studies major, class of 2022. And they're going to speak from their own perspectives as students here at the college.
There we go. All right, here we go. Good evening. I'm Trey. I'm a senior religious studies major, as it says. And I have a couple questions that I was asked to answer from a student's perspective. The first of which was just about things that I've heard from other students, concerns, rumors. So I wanted to start off with something that Dave just touched on, which is the debt versus the endowment. Something that has been going around a lot is the concern that our debt exceeds our endowment and therefore puts us in a very precarious financial situation. In addition, I've had several professors over the past year and a half or so who are tenured professors who have talked to me that are concerned about their programs getting cut or losing their jobs altogether. Another thing that I want to touch on is that a lot of what I've been hearing is that this crisis really is not because of COVID, and that COVID really exacerbated an already bad situation. Moving along, I wanted to touch on a couple questions that I think students should be asking of administration. The first of which is just simply, what is administration's plan going forward and how are they looking out for our own needs? Personally, I'm a religious studies major, and that has been tabbed as a program that's under review. So even though I would likely be able to graduate with a religious studies degree, what assurances are there that would be a program that would still be a part of the school? Because in my opinion, it's something that is essential to the spirit of the school to have a religious studies program at a Quaker institution. And the second, and I would say most important question would be to ask for transparency. I personally have sat in meetings with members of the Board of Trustees and asked for transparency and asked for answers to questions about things that are going on at the school that concerned us, and we were not given any answers. We were told essentially that we had no right to those answers, and that we weren't privy to any kind of information like that. And the third and final question that I was asked to answer had to do with students coming together. And I really think that obviously this is a great forum for students to learn. But it really comes to each person trying to find their own voice. I know personally over the last year and a half, I've had the opportunity to, like I said, talk to board members and talk to faculty and really try and find out what is going on and how we can continue to preserve the spirit of Guilford. So that's all that I have.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Cade, and I want to talk a little bit more about shared governance, which was something that was talked about earlier. When it comes to the student perspective, I think what's important for us about shared governance is that students are involved in the design of any process the college takes going forward, and not merely plugged in for an existing process, not merely just ask what we think about something that's already going to happen, but be involved in shaping the process going forward. I also want to talk a little bit about what students can do going forward. So when you look at colleges who have gone through similar experiences in the past, one thing the school has tried to do is pit them against each other, make it a competition about which majors get to stay and which majors go. And that's a really effective way of getting students to fight amongst themselves and fight amongst departments, and not look at the root cause and not look at ways of advancing shared governance. So the main question then is, how do we get there? Well, hypothetically, if a college was acting in a way that wasn't, didn't line up with its values, or was putting undue burden on faculty and students would then need to put pressure on the college through various forms of direct action. So hypothetically, there would be a bunch of tactics that they could use, putting pressure on hypothetical institution through existing pathways in the institution, petitions, direct letters, protests, the type of things we've seen before. Also, if the hypothetical institution didn't respond to those students in that work, they could move into practices of trying to disrupt the operation of the colleges, stop the flow of business. They could do this hypothetically by orchestrating a boycott of the college and college activities, delaying tuition payments, asking alumni to suspend their endowment payments until things change, or asking businesses to stop doing business with the college. A goal could be to have a town hall directly with the trustees. No matter what students would want to do, there's a need for diversity of tactics. There's a need for students to come together and do what feels safe and right for them to make the change and to get their voice out there. Finally, I want to speak to this very real fear of retaliation that students might be feeling right now, because historically, when students have stood up, there has been threats of both personal and legal manner against students. If students right now, if you are feeling threatened, I want you to know that you deserve a protection and to be in a process together with other students. A coalition of students have also prepared a statement that they have asked me to share with you all, and they did not want to be named out of a fear of retaliation, which I'm now going to send to Dave, who I think will then put it in the chat. They would like for you to read over the statement that they have prepared and to get in touch with them if you feel like you would like to be in contact with them. Finally, I just want to say that when you think about going forward as students and possibly making change, I just want everyone to remember that we are stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you, Trey and Cade, for that. We are now going to move into the Q&A portion of our teach-in. Gail and I will moderate the Q&A. We do have some ground rules, if you will. We are going to prioritize student voices. So we will call on students before anyone else. And after students, we'll open up questions to community members and faculty. Whereas we welcome the presence of current administrators, we will not call on them to speak since they have other means for disseminating information. Participants, if you could please raise your blue hand in the participants box. If you click on participants down at the bottom of your screen and then click on your blue hand, that way we can see who has questions and in what order your questions are coming in. We would also like for you to please, if you haven't done already, to change your name so that it's your name, one, and also that it indicates your affiliation, whether you're student, faculty, alum, etc. Participants can ask direct questions to a particular panelist, or panelists, if they don't, panelists can jump in with answers. And please keep your questions short and direct so that we can get to as many as possible. Finally, at the end of the Q&A, there will be a slide with recommended steps for folks to take going forward. I see two hands up, neither of which is a student. Is there any student who would like to ask a question first? Okay, then Herb.
Sure. I can't unmute myself. There it is.
Oh, you're unmuted now.
Okay. So it's my question twofold. One is the slides that we were shown, and thank you for all the information we were given. Slides that we were shown showed that the knowledge of this, or the information necessary to determine that we would be in a financial crisis, was there way before. And yet we're dependent on the same board who saw all that information and made bad decisions for coming out of that crisis. And I want to know, how do we hold the board responsible for the fact that they got us here in the first place? Not just administration per se, but the board agreed to things. So that's question one. Question two is, where is the student, where are we talking about the impact of faculty cuts on students? We're talking about cutting faculty, cutting programs. What will that have an impact on future students coming to Guilford and what they will be looking for? If we cut faculty and enrollment goes down, we haven't gained anything. So how is that going to be factored in? Those are my two questions, Maria. I don't know we have answers today, but I think somewhere along the way, those questions need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a panelist who would like to jump in and offer some thoughts on that?
I can say quickly that as far as we can tell, there aren't ready means to hold a board responsible for the decisions that it oversees and is ultimately responsible for. And we haven't been able to find a case where that has happened, but we're gonna keep looking.
We'd like to take the question from Jordan, a current student.
Hello, I apologize for any background noise. I wanted to ask a question about majors. As a freshman, I feel like the history department and pursuing a career in history is my true calling. And now I see that the history major is under review, and I feel like my future is being ripped from me. How much should I worry about program cuts? How imminent is the threat of program cuts?
Panelist who wants to take that?
I can try, I guess. The short answer is that we don't really know because we've been given a timeline for the process, but we don't know exactly how it would wind its way through being implemented. The results of the process should be known by the end of the semester if they keep to the timeline. For students currently at Guilford, we would have our accreditation under threat if we didn't provide students a way to finish their majors if a program were to be cut. So any current student would be provided some pathway to finish their major that might involve continuing to take courses on campus, and the cuts would come at a later date, or it might play out some different way through consortium classes or that kind of thing. I think none of us really know what that looks like, and I don't know that any of us have been involved in that kind of decision yet because we haven't gotten to the implementation stage or even really had that very well described to us. So I'm sorry not to be able to give more information, but I do know that the institution will need to have a way for every current student to finish up a program, even if it is one of those that may end up being cut.
Thank you, Dave. The next student I see in line is Hannah Malone.
Hi, yes, I had a question about like the transitioning period and how like if one of the goals if anyone knows about a goal moving forward to include student input, or if like I guess just like if anyone knows that if whether or not student input is going to be a goal in this transition phase of Guilford.
That's a good question. I know the president has been holding some town hall meetings with various student groups. But I don't know what, she hasn't told us what mechanisms in particular that she is making available to students to participate in these decisions. So that's a good question. She does have open office hours every week, I think. So I think any student who wanted to either individually or with a group sign up for her office hours could just ask what kinds of mechanisms are available for student input.
Somebody sent a message to me indicating that there are some students on the committee that she's formed to do the long range planning. I don't know exactly what way they're serving, but this person thinks they've been named. And so those representatives might be people to talk to as well.
Our next student question comes from Lex Darrow.
Hi, so I'm a senior here at Guilford College and I'm a creative writing major, and I know the creative writing major and department is on the chopping block right now, and I was wondering if that does get cut during my time here at Guilford. Is there a possibility I would still be able to get possibly grandfathered into the major, since I am a senior and only have like 2 classes left to complete my major?
Yeah, Lex, all students who are currently students and who entered and have declared a major that's currently on the books will be given some means of finishing their degree in their chosen major. As Dave said earlier, it's possible you may have to take a course at one of our consortium members like UNCG, but really one of the things that faculty, staff, and administration really agrees on is that we've made a promise to all of our current students that they will be able to finish their degrees, and that's required by our accrediting body and just by every ethical principle.
Okay,
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Thank you.
Again, we're going to still continue to prioritize student questions, and the next student in line is Katie Farr.
Hi, y'all. My question is about what's the process that the college will be using to figure out which majors will and will not be cut from the program, and whether or not there's anything that we as students who are majoring in those majors that may or may not be cut, if there's anything that we can do other than just sort of cross our fingers and hope that our major isn't eliminated.
I think that at the end, we're going to have some steps that are going to be suggested to move forward. And right now, it's all in the hands of the president and the cabinet to make those decisions. All the programs under review have made their case and written reports, and it's out of faculty hands and it's in the hands of the president and the cabinet. Our next student question is from Analia.
You guys hear?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, cool. My question is, how do we as students talk to the Board of Trustees or the President's cabinet? And also, how can the students organize when there's the anti-protest bill going on and make ourselves heard?
Is there a panelist that feels that they can speak to that?
The president's cabinet is the vice presidents in charge of various areas. Roger Dagerman of marketing and enrollment. Ara Serjoui, who's vice president of advancement. Barbara Lawrence, who's vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And actually, if you go to the website and just search for cabinet, you'll find a pretty good list. So all of their emails are available. I don't know how responsive they are, honestly. As far as the protest policy, I recommend that you read it carefully. You can ask for permission to protest. And as a member of the policy committee, I'll be looking really carefully to make sure that the policy is enforced according to the letter very strictly. So if there are students who are trying to have a protest and they have been frustrated about that, please get in touch with me and I will pull together some other faculty and we will figure out how to get you the permission that you need.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. We next have a question from, the names are Kristen and Miriam. I'm not sure if it's one or both.
Hey, so right now it's just me. I'm Kristen. I'm a current student here at Guilford. I'm a sophomore. So my question is, based on what we just talked about in the state of the financial state of Guilford, are we implementing any policies that go towards helping the students financially? Like, what are we doing in terms of making sure that students are still able to come to the school while not being in too much, getting too much debt or being able to afford to come here? Is my question.
Any panelists want to take that one?
That sounds like a Dave question to me. Oh, He's muted.
I really don't know much about that or how that's being played out. So I'm going to have to beg ignorance on some of that.
I
Also-
can
think as
Also, I'm trying to respond to about 15 people in the chat, so I'm not sure I heard the question entirely.
The question mainly had to do with how what Guilford's doing to ensure that students are still able to basically pay their bills at Guilford. And unfortunately, what we've been mainly talking about is the terrible situation that Guilford's in. So we haven't had a lot of discussion about what kinds of funds are being made available to students. So that, and I think that examining what Guilford charges for tuition is going to be a necessary step for the Guilford leadership. But I think if that is a major concern of a bunch of students, I think it would be good for you to organize and make sure that the president hears your concern.
Our next student question is Connor Potts.
Hi. Okay. So essentially, my question is going to be like, worst case scenario, if a bunch of faculty get fired, is the school willing to commit to providing any like support to the faculty that they're going to cut, whether that be financial support or like job connection support or both? Yeah.
I'll attempt the first part of this question. I have heard the word severance package used, but I have not heard any details as to what that what that is, what they're proposing with that. As far as other jobs are going, I don't know truthfully what the college could do there. I mean, perhaps as per the handbook, they would be expected to find us opportunities within the college if those existed. But outside of the college, frankly, there just aren't a lot of academic jobs out there. And perhaps another panelist has some more to add to that.
I'll just say that I haven't heard severance package for faculty, but what I have heard is that those who are being let go have until next December. So they will know that they're losing their job, and then they have a terminal year, and then they'll be gone. But we don't know anything more than that. And we don't even know that for sure. We have nothing in writing.
We have our next student is Jordan Fridley.
Hi. I had a question regarding financial aid. Given the current financial situation of the college, what will happen regarding scholarship awards given to current students? Will we keep our scholarship awards? I sent it to Dave, but I figured I'd ask it like to everybody.
Yes, I would expect that because those are already budgeted into student packages and are generally maintained as long as students are in good standing and don't withdraw, that there would be no change in that. We've not heard of anything that would cover a change in student aid awards. I don't think that's something that they would mess with at all as part of this. I can't guarantee that because I'm not part of the administration, but I really don't think they would do anything with that.
Our next student question is Julia DeWitt.
Hi, I was just, if worst case scenario, our departments get cut, what is the credibility of a degree with that department on it if it does not exist at Guilford anymore?
I'm not sure that'll be a huge issue for you. Depends on the department, and it depends on the relationship that you have with your faculty members, probably, so that they can continue to support you and write letters for you down the line. So it should be a matter of record that that there was such a department at Guilford College for some time, and your degree shouldn't be affected by that. Whether Guilford, sort of like what will be the reputation of Guilford going forward, I don't know. And obviously that's true no matter what Guilford does. Yeah, I think it's not a huge concern. But I understand it, and I think that having a good relationship with your faculty might be the best advice I can give. Oh, look at all the people.
I would just add to that if you are thinking about going to, say, graduate school or professional school, and you need letters of recommendation, that the schools that would be looking at those letters of recommendation would understand the bigger picture of what's happening across the country, especially at liberal arts schools, and they would not hold you, the student, or even the department responsible for an administrative decision. I think we are now done with student questions. So we'll take our first non-student who's been waiting so patiently, Adam Waxman, an alum.
Hi, I'm Adam Waxman. I'm an 07 alum. I have degrees in political science and religious studies, both of which are programs under review. So I have the same question about what happens when your program goes away to your degrees. It doesn't take the knowledge away, I would say, and it doesn't take the experience. And so keep that in mind. So my question is kind of a broad one, and it's sort of, I feel like it was answered, but I'm curious, and this is coming from someone who's an alum who's outside the institution and wants to leverage power. Where's that lever go? Like, where's the fulcrum? Like, who are we? Is it the trustees? Is it, Carol Moore? Like, who should we be spending our time focusing on?
I would say it has to be the Board of Trustees. They have hired Carol Moore to downsize these or to right-size the institution. And so I think Carol is whatever Carol is open to in terms of moving people around, her ultimate direction is coming from the Board of Trustees. And the chair of the board, Ed Winslow, his contact information is widely available. Other trustees are more difficult to find, but again, if you go to the college website and just search for trustees, there's a list of them.
Our next question is from Caroline and Chris, who are on a call together.
Okay, great. Since this is being recorded, I have 4 questions, but I'd really like a response on my last question, which I will emphasize. So the first question is, will the slides be shared with the recording? Number 1. Number 2, are administrators agreeing to furloughs and other actions imposed on faculty and staff? Number 3, as alums, Caroline and I, and parents of a graduating high school senior who is considering Guilford for the fall of 2021, should we continue to encourage him to apply? And the 4th and last question, which I would love to hear from any of the panelists on, There are many important topics raised today with short, medium, and long-range implications. Given a history of diminishing shared governance with faculty and administrators and the important tradition of shared governance in Quakerism, what can we do, all of us on the line today, to force this process to reconvene? Thank you.
Can we bring the slideshow back? There was a final slide that included some recommendations.
Okay.
That's
Not
fine.
that I don't want to see everybody. I do.
Just Dave, give me 1 second to copy and paste something that you.
Sure.
Okay, I'm good.
Is that the slide you were after, Lisa?
There she is.
Okay.
Can you also unmute Krista Craven?
Hi.
She's gonna help me with this.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
This is chaos.
So again, in terms of alums, I think it's relatively easy to contact, literally, email the cabinet and the president with whatever it is you want to say. No guarantees on responses, but I think alums, especially those of you with college-age children, will have some real leverage. And so I think with any luck, that runs uphill. And so the cabinet and the president will be in touch with the trustees about what they're hearing from the sort of widespread Guilford community, including, I think, the widespread Quaker community. So I saw a couple of good old Quakers on the line, and including Chuck and some others. There aren't that many colleges left that claim that identity, and it's not clear at this point whether the trustees are still committed to it. So that might be a thing worth talking about. Krista, do you want to talk about the first?
Yeah. So yeah, there are some recommendations in terms of action steps that might address some of the questions that you all have had. And so the first suggestion is to ask the questions that need to be asked and don't settle for dismissive responses or misdirection. So you may hear in, from leadership or other folks, when you ask a question about what's going on, it may not directly answer your question or sort of veer in a different direction. So we suggest pushing to get your questions answered. Lisa?
Yeah, so if you have access to other folks in the alumni community, you can organize a conversation. Zoom actually in some ways makes it easier for us all to talk to each other, although maybe not in the most satisfying way. So you can together maybe come up with some ways of contacting the cabinet, the president, and the board to share your concern.
You could also prepare brief testimonies about your program, whether you're an alum or a current student. We suggest about 1 page in length, and have those ready to share in the town halls that have been organized for current students as well as for alum and parents. You share them with trustees or turn them into letters to trustees, share them with media, and so on.
As you're organizing with your group, I think, do think about whether you are going to, how you can prepare yourself in case there's any kind of retaliation or intimidation. Folks do like to tell you that you don't know what you're talking about, that they have all the information and that you don't have the information, which to some extent it's true because they're keeping hold of the information. So I think being ready to be told that you don't know that understand that you can respond, that you would like to get that information if they think it's so great. And that, you'd be happy to have a conversation once you've seen that sacred information that they have.
Also, you can keep records of statements that have been made, official statements, either in these forums, these virtual forums, or written statements, and track contradictions that between what is said and what you observe or experience. And so that's another way to sort of keep track of what exactly is going on and how it aligns with the narratives that are being provided.
Plan some actions that focus on specific issues, whether you're an alumni group or a student group or other interested group. As Kate was talking about, you can suggest that there are principled ways of delaying income to the college if the college is not willing to engage with you in a fair and direct way.
And lastly, make demands based on your needs, list specific actions that you want taken to protect your program, and make your needs known. So those are our recommendations for folks going forward. Thank you.
And obviously, if you all have recommendations, I hope that you will share them with us. We can share them out to the email group, which we now have in perpetuity of all of your email information. Seeing as there are so many blue hands up, we are gonna organize amongst ourselves to see whether we have the resources to have another teach-in in a week or two, maybe two. Also, as further information comes out, we'd like to share it with all of you who are so interested. So, so please know that it's not that we don't want to talk to you all. We would love to, and we will figure out how to make that possible over the next couple of weeks. I think we had a question come in that to the panel moderators that you wanted to read out, everybody.
Yeah, there's
Taylor Maria.
Yes, an anonymous question came in, and it asks, could you ask this for me anonymously? I wonder about whether there has been any discussion of a vote of no confidence in the president and or the board of trustees.
Again, maybe. It's not clear what kind of effect that will have on the board of trustees, but I do think it's a good idea for the faculty and staff to discuss. Those of us who have a real investment in Guilford College, I think, need to be able to use the means the ethical means we have available to us to get our voices heard. So that's a really good idea. I appreciate that anonymous question asked.
So we're over time. We appreciate everybody's time together. If you could, I think there's one last slide, isn't there? Or
yeah,
I want to thank everybody who took the time to be here tonight. I felt more in community with Guilford College in this forum than I have with Guilford in the past year. And it was really wonderful to hear my colleagues speak. I'm always impressed every time they do, and to hear your questions and to know that so many of you are concerned about what's happening, because this is going to be a real change for a lot of us. It's going to be a career ender for a lot of us. And it's going to be very hard that we're not going to be able to have the careers that some of you all on this call were able to have, and to have the kind of relationships with our students that you all have been able to have over the years. So I appreciate every one of you for being here. If you have questions, please send them to the email address that you see on this slide. We'll try to put things together. And like Lisa said, we'll be planning for a future teach-in, perhaps after we know some more information from the president and the board. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say that I have been monitoring the chat, and I'll have a record of that. And if there are questions that we can pick out of that we know the answers to, we'll try to put together a document that we can share. There's a lot that we don't know because we're not driving this process. We're kind of in the middle of it. But we'll try to speak where we have knowledge and to the best of our ability.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, Sunny. Bye, Emily. Bye, Tracy. Hi, Beth and Mo. So good to see you. Hey, Carrie.
Dave, should we stop the recording
Yes.
in preparation for debrief?